Hello, this is International Master Valery Lvov talking, and I'd like to annotate now some very instructive games that were played in the sixth round of the Indian National Premier Championship. Now, essentially, we'd like to begin with a game that was played between the Grandmasters, Venkatesh and Kunte, that was pretty instructive. That was probably one of the most exciting games of the round, and it started with the moves of e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, d4, exchange, recapture, and knight x to c6. Now, this line of the Scotch is known to be highly tactical and fairly complicated in case white chooses to play e5. However, white picked to do the move of queen e2, which, although it's not as popular in the theory, it has good ideas. For example, white involves the queen with the support of the e4 pawn, and potentially the idea of advancing pawn to e5 at a little bit of a later time, at a better moment. So this is interesting and important. After the move of queen e2, basically black cannot do d5 because that will open a discovered check, so he has to do d6 and then bishop e7, just as it went. Now, when black played the move of bishop e7, white continued with bishop e3, short castles, and long castles. Now, for most people who look at this system and this variation, they'll basically say this just doesn't look right. I mean, something's really not going, it doesn't fit well with white's strategy. I mean, he's not supposed to be making those kind of moves in the position. He's not supposed to be doing moves that just force all those pieces to stay back. And, in a way that will be right, that will be correct. The important thing, however, that I'd like to mention is white controls the center, and when you're controlling the center, you have a lot of great flexibility and support amongst your pieces. Now, that's exactly what white was relying on. He knew that this is more important than anything else, and so that center, that activity, that should guarantee him very good prospects to follow. Now, as a result of this move, basically black played knight g4. His intention was to jump in and attack, possibly even arrange that knight towards the e5 square, so that it's a good line to follow. It's a pretty solid control. So, what happened in the game was that after knight g4, white played bishop d2, f5, and h3. I believe that this is the moment where black simply overestimated many of his possibilities. It's not that the knight g4 idea was basically wrong, it was a fine idea. The problem that came with it was that black just followed through with a quick opening of the position. It simply wasn't right. See, when somebody is going to open up the position, that someone must be absolutely certain that he's got the position, the possibilities, and the preparation to deliver that without any risk. And that is a problem now, because really there is nothing that black could actually get to back it up with. And so after continuing with the move of h3, black played with the move of knight e5, and essentially next move was e takes f, bishop takes f, and then pawn to f4. Pretty strong looking move, just pushing the opponent's knight out of the way. That looks great. And so as a result of f4, black played knight g6. In fact, whoever controls the center usually has a great amount of flexibility and control, so that essentially his opponent has to try and stay away from opening up the position. This is exactly what black did not avoid, and this is where everything just goes wrong for him. When the black knight comes back to the g6 square, now this is a good moment for white to challenge. And yes, he does that very quickly. This next move was g4, which felt really strong in the moment. It's a good move, very good looking idea. And we can understand why that's just not so good. I mean, most of black's pieces are pretty badly set. When the move happened, black played with bishop to d7 and then f5. Could the pawn structure be the reason why this position is actually kind of bad for black? Could it be a really solid reason? Yes, it could. The fact that most of black's pieces are so much behind and not as good is exactly, and I would say the only reason why this position stands so bad at the moment. Like after f5, we can see that the black knight has to move away, and white can do different things to take advantage. So there was knight e5, knight e4, d5, and then bishop c3 brings the bishop into play. It's a perfect looking move, and it's beautiful too. Now we see the real problem. The knight has to go back, the bishops have to remain down, and there is really no good way on how he can move along and plan anything in terms of counterplay on the queen side. This is just too difficult. So let's see. Okay, bishop c3, knight c4, h4. It's impressive to see white's consistency. White could have gone with many moves like king b1 or b3 or some others, but he doesn't want to do that because he knows that the most valuable is to be consistent with your plan. Whatever plan you're going with, you need to be very clear with that and just go along the way. White knows that now by bringing this pawn on the h4 and moving along with the idea of pawn to g5, he could very easily make a move of f6 or something similar, and that will do exactly everything that we're looking for on that side of the board. It's great, consistent, pretty powerful, and good to follow. So after that, black had to do rook to b8, queen f2, and queen d4. It's interesting that white is taking all that time to do it. Most people who actually think about such a position wouldn't really get to use so many different moves. And that mainly comes from the fact that most chess players will be looking at a quick way to attack the opponent, and that's not good. What you need to do is to remember that in those positions, speed always depends on what your opponent can do. This means if the opponent isn't actually in condition to deliver any huge threats or anything dangerous on the opposite side, you don't have to worry about going too fast. You can just go at a normal speed and things are going to go well. Why? Because you'll be good to go. You have many different ideas. And so that's exactly what happens. Go after queen d4, black plays rook to the b7, rook to f7, and essentially after continuing with the move of knight g5, bishop takes the g, then there is pawn takes the g. There is a pawn, there's an open file directly on the h, and then after queen takes g5, bishop d2. I can guess that there was the possibility to play with a rook to d2 in this position, just so we could step out of the danger. I mean, at least in my opinion, it would have been a decent idea. But then after bishop d2 anyway, black played queen f6, bishop e3, knight a4. Probably this was a slight mistake by white. You see, I'm not a great fan of backward moves, but one thing I want to say, which is pretty important, is as much as is possible, a player must try to maintain his valuable pieces on strong positions. And I mean, like, seriously, as much as possible. A move like rook to the d2 would have been much better. In this case, if black played queen f6, white would have had queen takes f6, g takes f6, and rook h6, which just shows the value, strength of that bishop. So the bishop would have remained on a very powerful place. It would have maintained the pressure versus black's position, and you'd have a lot to worry about. That's a very good idea, by the way. So, speaking of which, after bishop d2, black got a little bit of a chance. And I'm saying a little bit because even what happened in the game was not enough. And yet, here came a mistake. g5. I remember looking at this game for the first time, and I was like, what would be white's best shot in this position? What's the best thing that he could possibly do so he can consolidate his position and make everything work? And then it strikes me, okay, what's the best thing that white could do in this position? Of course, the most important move to be played is b3. Often in such positions, the easiest way for you to get a good, or even I would say an advantageous position, is if you play something simple that will help you to stay out of trouble and will guarantee you good protection on all the key points. With a move like this, what would have happened is that the pawn would actually get out of the danger. Then we could force the opponent's black to move, the opponent's knight to move back, and then after exchange, takes, and even bishop d4, for the most part, everything is resolved. g5 was way too fast, and that was probably played and born out of the white intention to quickly just engage more threats and carry on the attack against black. But that, actually, as you would see, works in an opposite way, in a very good way for the opponent. So, as a result, black just got the possibility to exchange the queens and take b2, and then there is all these complications taking place, which is just not good. I mean, let's put it that way. After knight takes to b2, g6, and rook takes f, there were a couple of little moves like this: bishop takes a7 and bishop d4, which was followed by bishop takes g7, a really fantastic tactic. The black king is very exposed in the moment, so we could see the real danger. If the king takes, there is going to be h8 queen and all those things happening. So that was okay. h8, rook takes h, check, takes, and so black made the last straw, the last mistake. What was it? In complex or challenging positions, a player must never ever look for a way on how he complicates. The problem was that black complicated by playing c5 and sort of sacrificing the pawn. You should have just played a different move, maybe like rook f7 or even knight c4 could have been played as well. That would have been better. But a move like c5 just allowed white to capture the pawn and then enjoy the other pawn on the a7. That's pretty big. The pawn is taken, the black pieces are backward, and the problems are just happening. So you have to remember, stability is probably the most important thing in such a position, and when it's not kept, it actually destroys someone's position. Perhaps it was just a little time that black had that forced him to lose here the pawn on the g7, after which things were pretty bad as they happen. But it's kind of valuable nevertheless to remember the principles. And yes, after c5, bishop takes g7 and h8, white won the rook, he made some exchanges, and the game was over. So that was the first and most interesting game for the day. I would also like to tell you a little bit about this next game, this other game that was played. It was played between the Grandmasters Setou Rahman and Ratanakan, if I'm pronouncing names well. If not, I'm sorry about that. In any way, it was an incredible example of the Benoni going wrong for white. C takes to the d, bishop c5. Now, some people believe that this line is going to help white to stay out of the Benoni in a way so that, you know, development goes easy and there is none of the the main lines happening. Well, while to a certain extent this is true, the problem is that white risks a lot in getting into a very, very bad position, and this is just so dangerous and so powerful out there. What actually comes in the next moves is the move of d5, which sacrifices a pawn, but on another hand, it instantly helps black to open up his pieces, and he could really get that development and turn it into an incredible attack versus the white king. It's a pretty powerful idea. Okay, so what happens next? After the move d5 and then bishop to the c5, obviously white's king is just not perfect. So he played with knight c3 to defend the pawn eventually, and get to consolidate. So it made sense to have that move happen. So knight c3. What black plays was short castles, g3, and queen b6. Now, it's really hard to find any immediate threats coming out of this position. I mean, like, okay, white's definitely protecting everything, and he will rely on that to maintain a good game. He would probably go for a move of bishop to the g2, short castles, and, you know, just some other moves similar to that. However, black has a lot of potential, and the potential is basically everything you're looking for. Now with the next move of bishop g4, black made an exchange, which to some will be just a really bad decision to trade off the bishops in this moment. Like, just we know that if we want to make the attack successful, more pieces must be maintained and kept on the board, so an exchange doesn't really make so much sense. Yet after the trade takes in e4, we could see the real intention of black. The pieces are now coming closer towards the middle, and they will arrange themselves on some very powerful places quickly towards king's side. So it's a good start, and it begins very nicely. After the move of knight bd7, white played b4, Bishop f8, bishop b2, and then a6, after which black did queen c7. I have to admit that queen c7 was perhaps not one of the best moves to be played, because in the end of the day, it was a bit of a backward move, and so we want to avoid as much as possible playing quite a bit backward. Perhaps a move like rook to c8 would have been better. Anyway, black played it, and then after rook d1 here, then there was king g2. Now, anybody who looks at this position is going to say, how is black going to lead up the attack? And what most people mean by attack is a way on how they could really break through or destroy the opponent's position. And that's not what an attack means. You see, the attack has 3 stages. The first stage of the attack is basically having a good target, something that you'd like to basically target against. Presently, a good target, we could say, is going to be the white king. I mean, in the end of the day, that is the one thing we'd like to go against. So having a good target is the first part. The second important thing you'd like to have, actually, as a matter of fact, is you need to think about having a good potential, good amount of pieces that you could go within. So right now in that position, we could see that black definitely has a pretty solid potential over here with his pieces. And then there is threats. But you see, sometimes the threats don't actually get to happen so quickly. So it takes a while, it takes some time until the things go as good as we want, as good as we expect. After that, black played rook a to c8. He was still building up. See, the amount of potential that we sometimes need in order to make the attack work it could be quite long. I'm not saying it will always be long, but it could be long. So, brace yourself, because a lot of times it's not going to work in the way as books suggest, or as you've learned by the different examples. Like here, black knows that the only thing he needs for the attack is more potential and more potential until the moment where there is good enough control and possibilities to attack, to create threats. So after the move of knight to the e5, which really helped black to get a very strong knight available, things start looking great. Knight e5 here, and then there is the move of knight up to f3. Very beautiful. I mean, I gotta say that this was really interesting looking, because in the end of the day, with so many pieces out there and such a strong potential, yeah, there's gotta be something we do. And so knight f3 happened, knight x d4, and the check. Takes, rook takes d. This is white's major mistake, perhaps I would say. His major mistake was that he did not estimate well what black could do with his pieces. Now, what do you do when your opponent comes up with such great pieces against your position? I mean, what do? You jump in, do you attack, do you defend, do you improve? What do you do? The truth of that is it's hard to suggest anything too special. It's hard to find anything great. The right answer, however, is you must try to neutralize any of his pieces that could potentially cause enough trouble or a lot of threats. They have to be forced or pushed away, moved out, so that they don't stay out there. The important thing is, white should have played perhaps a move like rook to the d4, so that he could fight against black's own rook, or maybe even at least f3 to fight that rook away. The move he did, which was bishop takes f6, was really not that good, because, well, now there was an incredible move that black found that simply destroyed white's position completely. You can take a moment here to think about it, but let's just see. I mean, black's got a great looking rook on a4, a nice queen on f5, and perhaps what he needs is something a little more to make the attack most successful. This one little detail is all that he needs to find out. And the one question is, how? What do we need? See, to answer that question, black just needed to think about the remaining pieces that are really not in the battle. And the remaining pieces the remaining piece is just one. It's that rook on a c8 that's pretty far away from where it really needs to be. The rook is away, it's out of the attack, it's not within the battle, and what we need is to get it there. So black just played rook c2, an incredible move that would actually come up, and white resigns because after rook c2 he can't do anything. Queen takes to c2 is met by rook g4 and a possible checkmate, and if he plays with queen f3, rook g4 check also kills the white queen. Even if white played with a move like queen to the d4-3, there would have still been rook g4 and queen f3. It's interesting to see how this game really worked for black because he was relying on the one key concept that matters most when it comes down to attacking, and that is who has more potential. If you can make more potential than your opponent, you will be extremely successful with whatever tactics you begin. It's a little idea, but it helps a lot when we think about it. So I hope that this makes sense, but in case there is anything more interesting, I'll be showing it with the next rounds, and so stay tuned for my next comments on the Indian Chess Championship, which is, by the way, an incredible tournament so far.